Naomi Carter was humiliated in front of dozens of people, accused of theft simply because she was black. Overwhelmed by tears, anger, and helplessness, she stood there, frozen. But instead of backing down or letting the weight of that injustice crush her spirit, Naomi chose to reclaim her dignity in the most unexpected way. In just a few short weeks, not only did she become the owner of the very store where she had once been treated unjustly, but she also transformed the lives of those who had looked down on her. What she did next would shock even the most cynical among us. But to understand the depth of her journey, we need to go back to the beginning. Naomi Carter was a confident and determined woman who lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. She was known throughout the community for her hard work and dedication, not only to her family, but also to several local causes. She volunteered regularly at the community center, mentored young women, and organized food drives during the holidays. Naomi carried herself with grace and dignity. Today was no exception. On that ordinary Saturday morning, Naomi set out for her weekly shopping trip to the local Fairway Market. She had been going there for years. She knew the layout like the back of her hand, and she even recognized many of the cashiers and stock clerks by name. The store was bustling with weekend shoppers. Families with carts full of groceries, couples checking shopping lists on their phones, and elderly neighbors comparing prices in the produce section. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Naomi moved through the aisles with practiced ease, filling her basket with fresh fruits, vegetables, milk, bread, and everything she needed for her family's dinner that evening. As she headed toward the checkout lanes, a tall man wearing a black polo shirt with the word manager stitched over his chest stepped directly into her path. His name tag read Victor Stanton. Victor's eyes were cold. His body language was decisive, as if he were acting on some hidden knowledge. Without a word of greeting or explanation, he blocked her cart and glared into her eyes. "You're stealing groceries," he said sharply, his voice loud enough to cut through the background noise of the store. The chatter stopped. Naomi froze, confused and stunned. For a second, she thought she'd misheard him. She looked around, realizing that dozens of eyes had turned toward them. A murmur swept through the crowd. People stopped mid-conversation, mid-step, watching with wide-eyed curiosity. "Excuse me?" Naomi asked, her voice trembling but steady enough to convey her shock. Victor didn't respond to her question. Instead, he repeated himself, louder this time. "You're stealing. Open your bag." The accusation hit Naomi like a physical blow. Her cheeks burned with humiliation. She could feel the weight of judgment in every glance that flickered in her direction. Strangers whispered. Some looked at her with suspicion, others with pity. No one stepped forward to defend her. Naomi, struggling to maintain her composure, looked Victor in the eye. "I'm not stealing anything," she said firmly. "You've made a mistake." Victor crossed his arms and gestured to the security team nearby. Two uniformed guards approached quickly, their faces blank, as though this were routine. Naomi tried to explain, repeating her innocence, but her words seemed to evaporate into the stale air of disbelief. No one was listening. No one cared. The guards pushed her cart aside and demanded to search her bag. When they found nothing but her wallet, keys, and a few personal items, they still insisted she leave. Victor gave a dismissive wave, signaling them to escort her out. Naomi was ushered out of the store as if she were a criminal. She hadn't even been allowed to pay for the groceries she had carefully chosen. Her pride was crushed. Her heart was broken. Back home, Naomi sat on her living room couch, the weight of what had just happened pressing on her chest like a stone. Her husband, Marcus, and their two children noticed something was wrong the moment she walked through the door. They had never seen her look so shaken. After taking a few moments to steady herself, Naomi told them everything. The confrontation, the accusations, the way people had stared at her like she was nothing. Her voice trembled as she spoke, anger and helplessness coloring every word. Marcus listened quietly, his jaw tightening with every detail. Their teenage daughter, Alana, clenched her fists while their young son, Caleb, climbed into his mother's lap, sensing her pain. "This isn't just about you," Marcus finally said. It's about what they think they can get away with doing to people like us. Alana nodded. You have to tell people what happened. At first, Naomi hesitated. She wasn't the kind of person to make waves or draw attention to herself. But with her family's encouragement, she decided to write about her experience and post it on her social media page. She described everything in painstaking detail: the humiliation, the injustice, and how deeply it had cut. She ended the post with a simple but powerful statement: no one should be treated like this. Not for the color of their skin. Not for any reason. Within hours, Naomi's story went viral. Comments flooded in. Friends, neighbors, and even complete strangers expressed their support and shared their outrage. Soon, local activists picked up her story, demanding accountability from Fairway Market. Journalists started reaching out for interviews. National media outlets picked up the story within days. Protests followed. Boycotts were organized. Community leaders called for the dismissal of Victor Stanton and a public apology from the store. But the store's management remained silent at first. As the pressure mounted, Victor was quietly removed from his position and disappeared from public view. Yet Naomi knew this wasn't enough. One man being fired didn't fix the underlying problem. That's when everything changed. One afternoon, Naomi received a phone call from a man named Darius Langston. Darius was a highly successful black entrepreneur in the city, known not only for his chain of organic grocery stores, but also for his philanthropic work and his commitment to social justice causes. I read your story, Darius said, and I want to help. Naomi was skeptical at first, unsure what he meant. But then Darius made an offer that left her speechless. I want you to partner with me, he explained. I'm buying that Fairway Market, and I want you to be part of running it. At first, Naomi thought he was joking, but he wasn't. Darius saw an opportunity, not just to support Naomi, but to create real, lasting change. And he wanted her to lead the way. It wasn't just about buying a store. It was about rewriting the story of that place. Within weeks, the paperwork was finalized. Naomi Carter, the woman who had once been pushed out of Fairway Market in disgrace, now owned it. On her first day as the new co-owner, Naomi dressed carefully in a tailored navy blue suit. As she walked through the parking lot toward the store entrance, her heart pounded. It was the same store, the same automatic doors, the same scuffed linoleum floors. But everything had changed. She was no longer a customer. She was the boss. The employees glanced up as she entered. Some smiled in polite greeting, unaware of who she was. Others looked uncertain, perhaps sensing that something was different. Victor Stanton was nowhere to be seen. He had resigned weeks earlier under intense public scrutiny. But Naomi knew there was still work to be done. She walked directly to the back office and met with the remaining managers. She introduced herself calmly, explaining that she was there not just as a figurehead, but as someone who expected and demanded change. And then she did something that surprised everyone. Naomi didn't fire the entire staff. Instead, she called for a meeting. Every employee, from cashiers to stock clerks to security guards, was invited. She stood at the front of the room and told them her story, not to shame them, but to remind them that what had happened to her could never be allowed to happen again. We're going to make this place better, she said, for everyone. She implemented mandatory diversity and inclusion training. She brought in experts to lead workshops on unconscious bias, customer service, and building a respectful workplace. She enforced a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination of any kind. And most importantly, Naomi made herself available. She listened. She held regular open-door meetings where employees could speak candidly about concerns or suggestions. Slowly, the culture began to change. Customers noticed. Fairway Market's reputation was transformed. People came not just for groceries, but because they wanted to support a business that reflected their values. Naomi's story spread far and wide. She was interviewed on national television, invited to speak at conferences about racial justice and equality. People told her that her courage had inspired them to stand up for themselves and their own communities. But for Naomi, the greatest victory was simpler. She could walk through the aisles of her store with her head held high, knowing that she had turned her pain into purpose. She had reclaimed her power. and used it to create a better world. For herself, for her family, and for everyone who walked through those doors.